Hi, I'm Josh, this is Josh is Making Music, and this video is actually going to be a little bit more talky than music-makey, because there is a lot that goes into being a musician outside of just making music. Now, music gear is really expensive, whether it's a guitar, speakers, synthesizer, some other thing. My point here is that it can cost a lot of money. So if you've been doing this for a while, you've probably found yourself either thinking about or actually selling, a piece of gear that you've had around for a while. What I wanted to talk about in this video is ways that we can assess whether it is time to sell a piece of gear, kind of framed through the lens of a decision that I recently made to sell my Electron Digitone. Now, if you're not familiar, the Electron Digitone is a 4-track FM-based groove box. At the time that I picked it up, I didn't really have a lot of gear that could be sequenced over MIDI. I had a Synthstrom Deluge, which I really loved, and I wanted to use the MIDI functionality of it. So at the time, the Digitone really made sense to me. It would give me a whole new palette of sounds that I could sequence over 4 tracks of MIDI, along with the Digitone's own sequencer to add a little more flavor to it. But about 6 months ago, it occurred to me that I'd kind of accumulated a lot of MIDI sequenceable gear, and I didn't need the Digitone in the same way. That's not to say that it had somehow become like a worse instrument. It's still a really great sounding synthesizer, sequencer, groove box, but it didn't serve the same purpose in my studio. The thing that I'd gotten it to do was no longer necessary. Of course, I don't think it should really be that important to anyone that I sold the Digitone specifically, but I thought it was a good lens for me to talk about the topic of selling gear. One of the best pieces of advice I've actually gotten when it comes to selling gear came from a YouTube video by the YouTuber The Midlife Synthesist. It was a video called Gas Therapy. Watch this before selling your gear. Gas like gear acquisition syndrome, not like intestinal distress. The idea there is that if you have a piece of gear that you're thinking of selling, you box it up, wait for 6 months, see if you find yourself needing it or if you can get by without it. I will admit with the Digitone, I went for 4 months, not 6. I never claimed I was a role model, but also I've been mulling over selling it for a while. A piece of advice that I'd like to add is that if you're thinking of selling something, grab a pen and paper or pop open a Word document and try to put into words like the exact function that serves in your studio. The reason for this is that, people can develop a kind of emotional attachment to inanimate objects, but there's a reason that we get this gear. It's there to serve a purpose in our studio. So we want to work out what that purpose is. And after you've done that, look around your studio and see what other things do you have that could serve that same role. Do you have other pieces of gear that make the one you're thinking of selling kind of redundant? Or does it serve a purpose that you currently can't replace? That's definitely going to be something to keep in mind before you go off and sell something. In my case, I had several devices that could give me a varied palette of sounds, and I personally preferred the Deluge's sequencer over the Digitone's. So the way I came to the decision to sell was that there just wasn't anything in my studio that the Digitone did that I didn't already have covered in a way that felt sufficient to me. All that being said, something to keep in mind is the uniqueness of your gear. If you've got something that's vintage or something that might have been customized in some way, if you sell it, you might not have the opportunity to get it again. Now, buying back a piece of gear after you've sold it definitely sucks. But I would say that what sucks more is when you sell something and you cannot buy it back because it's just not on the market. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is when you're selling. If you've got a piece of gear that you want to sell, maybe listing it around the holiday season is better than listing it in the middle of summer. You could probably get a little bit more money for it because people are more eager to buy things for gifts. My point here is that for some gear there might be a time to sell, for other pieces of gear that time's never going to come. But when you're selling something, you should always approach it carefully and remember that the sale can be as impactful for the buyer as it is for the seller. I'm not telling you to go out and sell a lot of gear so that you can get like a nice new guitar or a cool new synthesizer or anything. Please don't go out and sell stuff recklessly. But if you're thinking of selling something, like we mentioned earlier, box it up, let it sit, list out what it does, see if you can cover those functions and get by without it. The last thing that you really want is to sell something only to find yourself buying it again a month later, having the same gear but now being out, $100 or God forbid more. With that, I want to thank you so much for watching. Like I said, a little more talky than music-makey, but I thought it was something that was interesting to discuss. If you've got your own pieces of advice when it comes to selling gear, please leave a comment and share. Both for me, of course, I don't think I'm like an expert on this topic. It's something that everyone can benefit from learning more about. And, also for anyone who's come over to this video and is looking for advice. If you've watched all the way here, again, thank you. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and hitting subscribe. We're about to hit 2,000 subscribers, and while I might seem, calm and collected on the exterior, I am actually doing emotional backflips. I'm really excited about that. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.